Well, hello and welcome to Off the Bench here in beautiful Hamilton, Ohio. Reed Mouse here on a Wednesday, midway through the week. An exciting week. Bengals play tomorrow on Thursday Night Football right here at Paycor Stadium. I believe it's a whiteout. We bring home, we're playing my least favorite sports team ever. I hate the Steelers with a burning passion because they ruined my childhood. And hopefully we can ruin their Thursday night tomorrow. Reed Mouse in the chair. We got a fun show for you guys today. We're gonna talk about a little bit about that game tomorrow. We're gonna do a mailbag. We had a lot of questions in our DMs and our email, so be sure to keep firing those in here, and we'll keep answering them live on the show every single Wednesday. So we got a fun show, and then we're gonna have Nick Kirby on. Talk about the Reds. We're going to talk about the Reds later on. So I haven't heard from Kirby in a while, and me and Nick get along famously. So we're gonna talk about the Reds. He's gracious enough to give us 15 minutes of his very, very busy time. He's a very busy guy, very hard worker, and I'm so thankful for him to come on. Stone Shields here. What color would you call that shirt? Coral? Is that a coral shirt?
Yeah, and if you notice, the light looks a little bit different on me because I had to mess with the white balance because the setting that we usually use, it doesn't work with the green screen. I was going to keep that a secret, but you just let everybody know that we're in Hamilton, so obviously, the backdrop there, that's not beautiful Hamilton there. So we are operating with the green screen here, and with this shirt that I'm wearing, I had to mess with the settings a little bit there, so I look a little discolored, but what are you going to do? I guess I can't wear this shirt again.
It's I gotta, whenever I have to produce the show now from here on out, like I think I do the Bengals stuff and what like that, and I just normally use that same backdrop. I should change the backdrop to where it's downtown Hamilton skyline, the beautiful skyline of old Hamilton, Ohio, so that just get a different look sometimes. I don't know if we've ever told you guys this story before we get into our main thing, but before we kind of restructured this studio, and about 2 days before we went live on the restart of Off the Bench, Stone, recognizing that me, Casey, and Trace are never busy, was like, you know what? I think we should paint that wall. And completely move the room around. So, yeah, we had to completely strip the studio out and paint a new green screen on the other side. And we thank you for keeping us honest and making us work a little harder, Stone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to let me live that down. That is not actually what transpired. But, yeah, you'll keep acting like it was all me banging the table that, we got to get the green screen over here. But we did a good job. I think you certainly helped out. You made some time in your busy schedule to come in and paint with me. So, yeah, I think it looks good. We won't show them what the rest of the studio looks like.
It looks okay. If you look at the wall, it looks okay. The rest of the studio, if we zoomed out, it's about as chatterbox as get. Let's get into the show. So tomorrow is Thursday Night Football. The Bengals come in at 2-4. They're actually somehow in second place in the AFC North, and they'll be taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if you guys have seen all of the nicknames that this game has been called. I've seen the Geezer Bowl. I've seen the Unk Bowl. I don't know if you've seen any of those nicknames come to mind, Stone. Have you seen any of the
Icy Hot Bowl?
The Icy Hot Bowl. That was the one I was thinking of. That's a great name. The Icy Hot Bowl. Well, it's Aaron Rodgers versus Joe Flacco, and obviously Mike Tomlin made waves earlier on this week talking about, for the first time in really, as far as I can remember, a head coach taking a shot at another team's executive for trading Joe Flacco midseason, and that made waves throughout the national media. But I want to talk about this game in particular to what it means to the Cincinnati Bengals season. And it was a running joke on our show last year. We called every single week a must-win, a can't lose, a gotta have it, whatever we needed, whatever synonym of must-win, that's what we called it. And it was a joke that was even brought up to Shemar Chase. Someone asked him what he thought about the phrase must-win. He's like, feels like every single game we play is a must-win. At least that's what you guys have been telling us. But here on this show, Stone's been laughing at me off screen because I keep flip-flopping on what I want from this Cincinnati Bengals season, because I truly do not know. I truly don't know what I want as a fan. Do I want to keep contending? Do I want to keep competing, win games, keep everything afloat for the proposition that maybe we can keep it afloat and maybe Joe Burrow can come back? Or do I want to strip it all down and start anew and really focus in on next year? And I keep flip-flopping. At one point, I was like, hey, we should trade everyone. Now I'm like, all right, let's keep it going. I'll tell you what. We go into this game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is the barometer based on the outcome. Not even based on how we play. Based on the outcome of this game is what we should do going forward. Because you win this game in second place at the AFC North, where the Bengals are. And I know the Steelers are 4-1, we're 2-4. Based off of that, you can take a game, get an inch closer. You got another game against the Pittsburgh Steelers in about 3 weeks after a bye and after 2 games that you can win. You win this game, yes, all aboard. Let's keep fighting for this thing. Let's keep fighting for, Zach Taylor's going to keep fighting for his job. Duke Tobin's going to keep fighting for his job. Joe Flacco's going to try and keep this thing around. We're going to start getting reports on how Joe Burrow's injury is progressing. All on board for that, especially with the current situation in the American Football Conference in the AFC where no one's grabbing it by the reins. The best team in the league, and who we proclaimed as the best team in the league, and it just 9 days ago we were talking about, is this thing done? Are the Chiefs done? Now they look like the best team in the AFC, and they're 3-3. The current number 1 seeds, the Indianapolis Colts, or the Jags, or the Steelers team that, they're 4-1, but every single year they just get into the postseason and then absolutely get blown out. So no one's taking them truly seriously, especially since Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game since, 2016? Something like that. So this is the barometer. I'm not calling it a must-win because I don't even know if it is. I don't care which way we go. I'd prefer it to be more competitive. But you win this game, then yeah. Pull them sails up. Let's catch some wind and see if we can beat the Bears, see if we can beat the Jets, and get back to 4-4. 5-4. Before we play the Steelers again in Pittsburgh. You lose this game, you drop to 2-5. That pretty much does you in. The Ravens are going to be bringing back Lamar Jackson. You already dropped 1 game to the Steelers, so they're up to 5-1. You'd be down to 2-5. That pretty much does you in. So for me, this is the barometer. This is the telltale of what this season can be. They looked better with Joe Flacco. Wish they would have made the moves weeks ago. You probably could scrap out one of those wins along this 4-game winning streak if Joe Flacco plays all of them, but they didn't. And he didn't. So you win this game, I'm all back on board. I'm all back on board, and I'm looking towards if we can beat the Bears and the Jets before that bye, and if we can come back on the Pittsburgh Steelers, get back to a winning record, and see what we can do with this season. We lose, it's done. It's done. It's a huge swing game. It is a huge swing game. And I know we've already done it a few times this year. It's been the joke about what is a must-win. Why is it always a must-win? Well, it's always a must-win here in Cincinnati because, quite frankly, they don't put themselves in great positions to succeed in the middle part of the season. Last year, you're playing from behind the 8 ball. 2 years ago, you're playing from behind the 8 ball. 3 years ago, you're playing from behind the 8 ball. They never put themselves in an opportunity to succeed in the middle part of the season. They have to rattle them off and they do play better in the winter. They do play better after Thanksgiving. And they've got a chance to win 3 games at the back end of the year, but it's a long time away. And I'm circling this game as this is exactly the result of this game is exactly where the team should be heading going forward. Stone, I'm circling this as a barometer. You lose, all right. Let's start. I know they're not going to phone it in, but you start as a fan going all right, I want to start losing some games. They win this. They're not right back in the thick of things, but they put themselves in an opportunity to keep it going.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I'm not going to go as far as to say it is a must-win on Thursday, but I think they must go either 2-1 or 3-0 going into the bye. If you only win 1 game, or if you lose all 3, then you can pretty much write it off as the season is over. But I think they have an opportunity here to go 2-1. 3-0 is probably a little bit too aggressive, but 2-1 over the course of these next few weeks. You settle in with Joe Flacco going into the bye, and I think your mindset then in the bye is a little bit different. It's okay. How can we keep this thing rolling and try to find ourselves in a position where we can still be afloat when Joe Burrow comes back? Whereas if you go into the bye with a 1-2 record or an 0-3 record over the course of these next 3 weeks, I think the mindset is, okay, let's move off Trey, right? Let's get a pick or two for him, and let's maybe make some other changes and kind of just gear up for 2026. Not just mail it in, because guys, of course, are still competing for their jobs. You got a lot of youth on this team. The coaches are coaching for their jobs, of course, as well. But I think you'll see a level of aggressiveness kind of go down if they don't have a 2-1 record or a 3-0 record going into the bye. For the record, I've said this, and I know you agree with me here as well. I'm expecting Cincinnati to win on Thursday, and I haven't had that expectation since week 2. In the past 2 weeks, there was some hope maybe that you could beat Minnesota or Denver, but quickly after how bad Browning started out those games, you knew that wasn't going to happen. I don't think anybody expected to beat Detroit and Green Bay. By the way, I thought they were going to lose those games with Joe Burrow when we rolled through the schedule to begin the year. So I think there's an opportunity here. We talk about must-wins. I think they must go 2-1 or better going into the bye in a couple of weeks.
So the reason I think that this is so important is because if you lose this game, that pretty much seals it up for the Steelers. And not officially, but I think we can all agree that this would kind of seal it up for the Steelers in the AFC North. No, they'd be 5-1, we'd be 2-5, Ravens would be 1-5, and the Browns aren't doing anything.
Yeah,
so,
it would feel like
it'd be done in the AFC North for unless something crazy happens. And I guess I'm not holding on to the hope that 2 AFC North teams are going to make the postseason based off the way it is right now. So that's why I think that winning the division is kind of the only way forward. And I know you get to 10 wins regardless. You're going to have to get to 10 wins either by winning the division or to win the wild card. Like 9-8 is not going to win the AFC North more than likely. And 9-8 probably won't make the wild card. Like you'd have to go 10-7. So when I say this is a swing game, when I say this is important, when I say it's the cliche of a must win, is because I'm working under the opinion that more than likely 2 AFC North teams are not making the postseason. More than likely, you won't see the Steelers and the Ravens, the Steelers and the Bengals and the Ravens. Like you won't see a mix of those 3 teams in the postseason come January. So you've got to win the division. At least that's where I'm at. And any route in which I circle the Bengals ripping off and doing something unprecedented with Joe Flacco, I feel like the Bengals almost have to go 5-1 in the AFC North. You look at the games that they have to win, it almost always comes back to going 5-1 in the AFC North. So you're going to have to either sweep the Steelers or the Ravens with a Lamar Jackson. And when you're going 5-1 in the AFC North, you got to win the ones at home. You got to win the ones at home. And I'll say this, betting lines aren't everything. They're not. But they're a good way to judge how you are as a team, like how you're thought of as an organization, how you're thought of as a franchise. And it's a good way to gauge yourself of so last week we were 14-point underdogs, and that's just a pure saying this team's not very good. Well, this week, Thursday, short week against Aaron Rodgers and Mike Tomlin, Joe Flacco, who just joined the team 9 days ago, 8 days ago, whatever it is. We're 5-point underdogs. That's a competitive team. And I can't shake the feeling that we're going to beat the Steelers. And God, I hope that is true because I hate the Steelers. Stone, before we get in the mailbag, any more thoughts on this game? And did I change your opinion at all when I said you have to go 5-1 in the division? You more than likely have to win the division. There's probably not going to be 2 teams from the AFC North. That change your opinion at all?
Wouldn't say that. You said feels like 10. You need 10 to get in. I think this could be a year where 9 gets you in. But again, if Pittsburgh wins Thursday, like they're probably going to get more than 9. But when you take a look at the rest of the AFC, I mean, I was clearly wrong. I said before the year I thought 3 teams were getting out of the North. I mean, you could argue they shouldn't even have 1. But obviously, one team definitely obviously has to win that division.
Right.
But, I mean, the conference as a whole is weak. I think Zach Taylor understands that. That's kind of what the Bengals are trying to spin it on and basically say, like, yeah, we're struggling right now, but, we still have life here considering what's going on around the rest of the conference. So, but then again, it's like, can you get to 9 wins, right? You look at the state of this team right now. Can you get 7 more wins than you have right now? I mean, the math starts to get a little bit difficult. The schedule's not easy, but it gets a little easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these past few weeks, they were going to be hard games with Joe Burrow that maybe you lose. And a lot of people going into the year were predicting that you were going to lose to teams like the Lions and the Packers and even the Vikings and the Broncos to some degree. So it's not like they're layups that the Bengals are missing. It's just the fact that they've been completely uncompetitive in the game. Something I did want to mention, pretty significant news here for the Cincinnati Bengals. Shemar Stewart is going to be back in action.
Yes, needed it.
And we haven't seen him since week 2 against Jacksonville, so hopefully that can provide a bit of a spark for them in this game on Thursday. Because I think he was showing some promising signs over the course of the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's huge. Shemar Stewart getting back there just adds extra pieces to the pass rush. It adds extra pieces to everything this team needs. All right, let's get into the mailbag. We got Nick Kirby coming on at 10:30. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Reds. I'm trying to bring on different guests, and was thinking about getting another Bearcats guy on here. We're going to talk FCC probably next week, and we'll get some different guests on here. But we're going to have Nick Kirby here on at 10:30 to hang on one second. I got to do something. Casey, they are in my pocket. Here you go, big dog. It's in that truck. He was looking for his laptop. Crazy things. Mailbag, Stone.
All right, here we go. This first question comes in from Tasden Bailey.
Tasden
yes.
He's always very generous. He or she, I'm sorry. Always very generous to send in some questions.
Yes. And doing it again here on a Wednesday. We certainly appreciate that from Tasden. Dear Off the Bench, for the past couple of years, they've tried to make a Monday Night Football doubleheader work, and I hate it. I simply don't understand who it is and why they do it. What are your thoughts on the Monday Night Football doubleheader?
Yeah, that's a good question. Who's it for? Like, who genuinely is the Monday Night doubleheader for? I don't know a single person that enjoys the Monday Night Football doubleheader. And here's the biggest takeaway that I have for this. Across the board, it seems like everyone dislikes it and hates it. I think part of the reason they're doing it is because then you're getting, in theory, by having 2 games, you're having more eyeballs. So you can sell ads in a different way because you can say, like, hey, there's more people watching this game. The thing I hate most about the Monday Night Football game is one of the best precipitations of watching media, of taking in media, especially on television, whether it be a show, a movie, anything, is talking about it the next day. That's a thing that happened in the 90s, back when cable television, back before streaming became a thing, and they just dumped every episode all at once, although we're kind of getting back to, a show per week kind of thing. But, appointment television where you sat down, you watched it, and then the next day at work, you sat around and you talked about it. Like, that was one of the cool things. I imagine that's what it was like in the 90s with Seinfeld. I imagine that was like in the early 2000s on HBO with The Sopranos and things like that, when those shows, The Wire, when those shows were super popular. And even Breaking Bad and Mad Men and those, they still happened, 10, 15 years ago. Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football and Sunday Night Football are kind of the last remnants of that. To where everyone that that you talk to sits down and watches this. We're all going to sit down and we're going to watch the Chiefs versus the Lions on Sunday Night Football. And you can text your friends about it, and you show up to work the next day. Luckily, we get a talk show, so we get to talk to a lot of people about this. But you show up to work, and you sit and you talk about what you saw the night before. Patrick Mahomes didn't look too good. Jared Goff deserves more. Whatever it is. By putting 2 games on Monday Night Football, they are ruining that. They're ruining that. They are, because you can't watch 2 things at once. You can't. And you can always say, well, there's one game that's better than the other, but still, it's ruining the appointment television of Monday Night Football, and that's my biggest takeaway from it. I know you're not a big fan of it either, Stone.
Yeah, I'm not. I completely agree with everything you just said. I mean, it's supposed to be, Monday Night Football. You gather around, you watch it, and you lock in. Now there's 2 games going on, and, a lot of times both of them aren't very good really either. I just don't – it's tough to understand why they're doing it. The 3-person booth, too, is something that I don't like at all. Really, any sport. I think Orlovsky and Chris Fowler do a tremendous job.
Baseball's okay.
You're all right with it in baseball?
Yep,
okay. Yep. Yeah, I think, Louis Riddick, he's obviously very knowledgeable, but I think if it was just Orlovsky and Fowler, it would be much, much better. But, yeah, it's just, what are we doing? Let's get another game. I don't care if it's the 1 o'clock window or the late PM slate on Sunday, but the double Monday night thing, it doesn't work. I mean, if you want to do like a 7 o'clock and a 10 o'clock, that's better at least than the 7 and the 8, but still, nobody wants to stay up on a Monday night and see a game start at 10 o'clock, even if it's a, West Coast team playing. So, yeah, it's, I get it. They've got some talented people, Fowler, Orlovsky, they want to utilize them, but, yeah, it's Monday Night Football. It's supposed to just be one game.
I'll say that if it is like next week, they're doing the doubleheader where they're staggered, right? Where it's 7 and 10 because it's a West Coast game next Monday. I believe that's what they're doing. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure they're having a 10 p.m. game next Monday. That's okay, right? That's fine if you want to have the West Coast people have their own primetime game, so their primetime isn't at 5 o'clock. I'm okay with that. I don't know the business sense of having a doubleheader. I don't get what they're trying to say other than, in theory, they're getting more eyeballs by just having more content. Next question.
All right, next mailbag question comes from Tasden Bailey.
Tasden again, doubling up. What about that?
At this point, the consensus is that Baker Mayfield should win the MVP. Have you watched Bijan Robinson? He is on pace to potentially break the single-season yards from scrimmage record. Why are only quarterbacks winning the NFL MVP award?
This is a question that comes. Saquon Barkley last year. It comes up every year. Is like, oh, the MVP is a quarterback's award, or the Heisman is a quarterback's award. You know why? Do you know why the quarterbacks always win the MVP award? Because it's called the most valuable player, and the quarterback is the most valuable player. Bijan Robinson is absolutely outstanding. Saquon Barkley last year was absolutely exquisite. Like, these are phenomenal players. Jamar Chase last year was otherworldly. Almost every executive would trade Bijan Robinson for a top 10 quarterback. Like, that's just point blank. Like, that's why. It's the most valuable player award. I get that it's frustrating that it's always the quarterback winning. Who was the last running back to win it? Adrian Peterson 13 years ago, 2012? Like, I get that that's frustrating. And I get that football guys are like, quarterbacks aren't all that matter. But point blank, quarterbacks are the most valuable player on the field. That's why it would take a Travis Hunter playing both ways kind of season and lackluster quarterback play for anyone to be like even remotely considered like to make it a race competitive. It's going to continue to be quarterbacks for this foreseeable future. You might see one running back win it every 15 years, like we're currently on the pace, one every 20 years, because the quarterbacks are just more important. They just are. I'm sorry to tell you, they just are. If you call up the Atlanta Falcons right now and they say, hey, we'll give you, there's about 12 quarterbacks, and I know Michael Penix is okay, but there's about 12 quarterbacks that they would take right now for Bijan Robinson. And they understand that they already have a starting quarterback, but they do it. It would, because it's just more important. It just is. It's just more important. Your opinion on the quarterback? It's a quarterback award thing.
I've got issues with the award, right? It's called the MVP, right? The most valuable player. And I agree. Quarterback is the most valuable player on the team. He's got the ball in his hands on every snap, and he has to make decisions and figure out where to go with the football, and the fate of the entire organization is in his hands each and every play. That's okay, but then you're going to spin it, and it's like, well, it's not just the best quarterback. It's got to be the best quarterback on one of the best teams, and this is going to come off as bias, but you can't sit there and look me in the eye and say Josh Allen was more valuable to his team last year than Joe Burrow was. He wasn't, and I get it. Joe Burrow's team, they won 9 games, and, it wasn't – they had lost a lot of games they shouldn't have. The defense was horrible, fine. But Joe Burrow was the most valuable player in the league last year, and he didn't win it because his team wasn't good enough. So I've got issues with the award. Go ahead.
That's a fair take, is that success is often attributed to the award. Like you got to be on a really good team or a competitive team. Like a sub 500 team is not going to win. And I know the Bengals were above 500, but they weren't a playoff team. That's a fair criticism. The criticism of the running backs like Saquon Barkley should win it last year. I think that's just ludicrous because I think I think the best running back on any given year is about as valuable as like the 7th best quarterback. Like I just think that's the way it works. I'd say edge rushers sometimes are more impactful than running backs, but we'll see. I mean, a running back will win it in the next 15 years or so. Maybe Bijan Robinson this year. Who knows?
Yeah. I think, and think about Saquon last year. That's as good of a season as you can have as a running back. It doesn't get any better than that. And I think you and I agree. Like Josh Allen was more valuable last year than Saquon Barkley. Are the Eagles as good? Did they win the Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley? No. But I still think they're a competent team that's a playoff team. Whereas you take Josh Allen off the Bills,
right?
You're looking at what the Bengals are doing right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's more than fair point. All right, we got one more. Time for one more before we bring on Kirby, I think.
All right. This question comes in from Stone Shields.
Oh, Stone, you're not talking enough on the show?
Call the authorities. This is ridiculous.
Call Matlock. Matlock, Sundays, 9 p.m.
Thanks, Reed and Stone, for taking my question. Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. Brian Callahan got fired after going 4-19 for the Titans, and that time he also went 4-19 against the spread, which shows just how over his head he was. Do you think the Bengals will bring him back onto the staff?
I've thought long and hard about Brian Callahan coming back to the staff, and I think the knee-jerk reaction was that, yes, he's going to come back. Because obviously he's had a lot of success here as the offense coordinator, even though he wasn't calling plays. And he probably has a really good relationship with Joe and Zach Taylor and other things. But then I started thinking about it like, well, he's going to need to be paid probably fairly handsomely to be whatever special assistant to the team or something like that. And I thought more and more about it, and I was like, man, on a losing team that the Bengals are right now, are they going to dish out? I don't know. $250,000, $500,000 to hire Brian Callahan for the rest of the season. Based off the way this team operates, I can't see that. It makes sense, right? Bring him back. Doesn't have a job. Zach will take him back in. He can get back working on football. And also Brian Callahan probably has had a really stressful couple of years to where he's probably just like, you know what, I'm getting paid either way. Let's just relax for a little bit. Let's just take a few months off of football and be, I assume he's got a family, be dad, be husband and all that stuff. So no, I don't think they're going to come back, but it is just another piece of evidence on the greatness of our number 9 that he goes down there. I don't think you guys are 4-19 is 4-19, right? Bad teams do that all the time. New coaches in a cluster that is the Tennessee Titans, a cluster, you know what? That happens. Going 4-19. Or is it 4-15? 4-15. Apologize. Whatever it is. Doing that against the spread it's unthinkable. It's unfathomable. Like Vegas normally pins your team pretty well, and you are underperforming what the bookies think of you. You're underperforming what the rest of this league thinks of you. Man, I thought Brian Callahan was a decent hire. I don't want to say a home run hire, but obviously he's been around he's been around the circles. His dad was a good coach, all those things, and normally those things translate. But what a disaster it is down there. And also, when it comes to revolving door organizations, you need sustainability. You need some sort, and that is above all else what you can say about the Cincinnati Bengals. At least we're not, and maybe you want to be those. Maybe you do. Maybe that you think that's the way of finding your peace. But at least we're not the New York Jets where we're just running a new coach every 3 years. At least we're not the Chicago Bears where we're running a new coach and a new GM every 3 years. At least we're not the Carolina Panthers or the Tennessee Titans. At least we're not that, to where you can say what you want about Marvin Lewis, you can say what you want about Zach Taylor, but sustainability at least brings kind of having sustainability in any organization is worth something. I don't know how much Zach Taylor's worth, but it's worth something. And maybe he's run his course, but 6 years is plenty of time to see what you're made of. But when guys get fired, a year or two in. I saw this stat, and we'll get to Nick Kirby, who's ready to go. I saw this stat that is just a true watermark of the NFL right now. The last 4, you guys have probably seen this too, the last 4 first overall picks, quarterbacks, their coach has been fired midseason of their rookie year. The last 4. Starting with Urban Meyer and most recently Brian Callahan, Cam Ward. Something to think about. All right, Stone, we ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I promised you guys a guest in here, and it's one guy that I get along with famously. Don't check our Discords to prove that. It's Nick. Thank you so much for being on here. I know you're a very, very busy guy. I just wanted to talk to you about some Cincinnati Relics. So thank you for joining us here on this morning.
Hey, Reed, how we doing? How's life? Congratulations in order for you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have 4 like you do. I have about a half right now, but we'll have one coming here. I'm really excited to welcome this little girl into the world. Do you have any girls? You have 4 kids, right?
2. Yep, 2 and 2.
Nice. That's a good mix. All right, let's talk about the Cincinnati Reds here for these 15 minutes. Obviously, the Reds make the postseason, lose their first 2 games against the Los Angeles Dodgers. First time the Reds have made the postseason in a full season since 2013. You now head into the offseason, and there's a lot of murmurs. There's a lot of rumors about what this offseason can hold. Is there going to be a shakeup? Is there going to be some major additions brought in? What is the biggest storyline for the Reds, in your opinion, for this offseason?
Well, it's. I mean, I guess part of it is do they trade Hunter Green? I mean, there's definitely been when it gets brought up by the Reds official beat writer, I think there's definitely some validity to it. I would still think it's probably more unlikely that it happens, but that's definitely a storyline. And then with that is how much offense you're able to bring in. Ultimately, I think there'll probably be a lot of trades. I think it'll probably be a very similar offseason to last year. Last season, there was a lot of trades. I think most of them weren't necessarily the big splashy trades that I think a lot of people wanted. Mm-hmm. But most of the trades were beneficial to the team. Brady Singer certainly helped the Reds get to the playoffs. Jose Trevino, despite not hitting at all the last 2 months of the season, the first several months of the season, especially when Tyler Stevens was on the IL, was very valuable. So I think you'll see the Reds probably wheeling and dealing a lot with trades, and it'll be interesting to see who's part of the core and who isn't, because that is a question that'll have to be answered this offseason. Yeah,
I think it's fair when you're talking about trading a piece like Hunter Green to call it like a retool instead of a rebuild or anything like that. But you said it's not likely that they trade Hunter Green. Hunter Green is probably, with his current contract, a top 5 in terms of value, what you're getting from pitcher to what you're paying for him in the entire MLB. What is kind of the idea behind getting rid of that contract and getting rid of Hunter Green? Like, why would they do that? Because it seems like a home run contract currently for the Cincinnati Reds.
That's a great question. I don't really it's hard to really see it. I mean, I'm always a guy that will say never on any trade, because you could get an absolutely insane return. I just have a hard time believing that anyone's going to pay what I believe Hunter Green is worth, which would be, I mean, it would be the kind of trade that the other team getting Hunter Green, even their fan base would be like, "Ooh, we gave up that much for Hunter Green." Like, it would have to be another team basically mortgaging a lot of their future to get Hunter Green. So that's why I have a hard time believing it'll happen. But when there's as much smoke, and there was definitely something going on with Green and the Reds organization. There was multiple things said about Green last year, and the more I've kind of done some digging, it seems like there definitely is some contention. But ultimately, you can only have so much contention when you have a guy signed through 2029. Eventually all parties do have to find a way to I guess, get along.
Do you suspect that part of the contention, if there is any, and you kind of got to dig deep into to find any contention between Hunter Green and the organization, Do you suspect that some of the contention is that it's buyer's remorse on the deal that he signed, to where he's like, wow, I kind of did myself dirty here, and maybe if I go to another organization, maybe they'll be willing to rework it, even though there's no leverage there. Do you think that there's that adds to some of the contention?
That's an interesting thought. Maybe to add on to that a little bit, maybe it's like, hey, I signed a very team-friendly contract, and I'm going to be overly cautious in terms of making sure I come back fully healthy and don't risk an injury for my next contract. And there could be some of like, well, we paid you, let you need to pitch versus, Hunter Green saying, yeah, I'm not going to risk any injury further. I don't know. With pitchers, it's hard to tell. Like every pitcher, I think, is always going to be pitching through some sort of pain and injury. But like the results for Hunter Green have been there. When he's been on the field, he's been, like you just said, one of the top 5, top 10 at worst pitchers in the sport. And really, like I was digging through the other day, he has made a decent amount of starts. Like this 2025 was the one year that he was on the IL twice. Every other year he was only on the IL one time the whole year. And I think he's still ranked in the top I think it was the top 32 of pitchers that have made starts since 2022. So, and he's made the most starts on the Reds. So yes and no a little bit on that.
Okay, if not Hunter Green, in terms of trading and retooling this team with some of the guys that are currently on the major league roster, who are some other names that you think will be floated out there as, all right, these guys might be off the team come opening day?
Nick Lodolo for me would be the one that would make, I think, the most sense, just because he only has 2 years left before he hits free agency. And Nick Lodolo, unlike Hunter Green, so Hunter Green is coming off a year where he was injured the most of his big league career. He missed the most time of any season. Well, Nick Lodolo had the best season of health, so that would kind of be selling more, high in terms of health versus selling low in some regards. Nick Lodolo would have to, I think, bring back a pretty massive return for me because he was an all-star level pitcher in 2025, but he would make sense. Certainly to trade. I think even a guy like TJ Friedl, who I think is somewhat become underrated again. He's kind of he was
up and down, doesn't it?
Yeah, he was underrated, I think, when he came up. Then he became overrated very quickly, and then I think he became underrated again, more so just because I'm not sure he's like an actual top of the order bat, but I think as a center fielder, he still is one of the more valuable center fielders in the National League. So I think Friedl would be a guy that makes sense. And then, you kind of have all those logjam guys of guys that are kind of at AAA or in the big leagues in CES, Rhys Hines, Will Benson. Those guys could all certainly be moved as well. And then they also have a bunch of prospects that I think at some point they probably are going to want to try to cash in on while you still have Elly De La Cruz.
Okay. So answer me this then. What is more important for the Reds going into next year? Internal improvement, guys that like Matt McClain that didn't play very well last year, or some young guys that haven't really had a whole lot of opportunity to flourish. Internal improvement or outside additions? What's more important for the Reds going into this next season?
Internal improvements, no question. I think you could go out and sign my dream signing of Kyle Schwarber, and it doesn't really make a difference if you have a mediocre season from Elly De La Cruz, Matt McClain, and Noelvi Marte, maybe. Like it just doesn't matter. You need Elly to be the player that he was from opening day through July. You need Matt McClain to just be a more consistent offensively. And then Noelvi Marte, you kind of need his same production. He only played 90 games in 2025. You kind of need that over the course of the full year. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is all that. And Sal Stewart, I think, would also probably be a guy that you need to kind of see him continue to to play and to show some promise. But yeah, it with the team like the Reds, it's always going to be the players that they have internally versus externally. I think if you think that this Reds team is probably a team that's as currently constructed is a team that is probably below 500, then I don't really know why you're bent over to shape out of wanting to go out and sign a bunch of free agents, make a big bunch of trades, because you're going to have to be have somewhat of a core that produces on its own to even get to like the level of the Milwaukee Brewers or the Chicago Cubs.
It's interesting. I know. I saw you put out the video last week, and there's been a lot of chatter about Kyle Schwarber, who's going to be a free agent coming here to Cincinnati. Obviously, he grew up a Reds fan. Obviously, he grew up in this area, lives in this area, and you could understand. And he seems like a guy that would, maybe want to come home, right? He lives in this area already. He's like, I'll just play in Cincinnati. I think he has a town up just south of Dayton, north of Middletown, and I understand why his name keeps getting thrown around, but I'll be honest with you, I guess I don't see it. I don't know what his market is. I know he's obviously a mid-50s home run guy, and you add him to Great American Ballpark, that can come up, but he's not going to play the field. He's going to be a designated hitter. Doesn't run the base as well. He's over 30, so he's in the back half of his career, back end of his career, and the Reds aren't exactly the team that can throw around money, and it seems like a really risky addition to give a guy like that, and I'm just throwing a number out there, probably north of $25 million, to just come and hit. Just come and hit, and that's purely the only thing that he provides for this team. Can you kind of, shed some light on why you think it would work here in why you think that the Reds should dish out that kind of money?
Well, if he's getting the kind of projections that we think, most projections have said like 4 years. That's the biggest key is the years. Right. I think like going out and signing a guy like Cody Bellinger to a 10-year deal would be far more risky for the Reds, where if he just completely falls off the cliff
as
after
he's done
year
before.
3, you have 7 years left. I mean, with Kyle Schwarber, I mean, it feels like a lot of things would have to go wrong for him in the first 2 years for him to be bad, right? I mean, like this guy has hit over 26 home runs every single full season since he's been in the big leagues, and he seems like a player. The fact that he doesn't have the platoon splits as a left-handed batter is something that's typically like your I don't think Kyle Schwarber's a Hall of Famer, but like if you played the field, like that'd be a Hall of Fame caliber trait. Like Freddie Freeman comes to mind with that. Joey Votto, when Joey Votto was at his best, comes to mind with that.
Cody Bellinger comes to mind with that.
Yeah,
he hits lefties very, very well and plays a good glove.
Yeah. So I think Schwarber to me looks and feels like a guy that's gonna maybe age like a Big Papi to me. And I think the fact that he doesn't play in the field helps him as well. I think that goes hand in hand with that. I remember I was watching a game in the playoffs, and you just see Schwarber. All his teammates are on the field. Schwarber's just on the iPad. I mean, he's just getting ready for that next at bat. I mean, this guy's literally only focused on hitting, and that's really what the Reds need. So, for me, the biggest reason I think you should be at least have a competitive offer for Schwarber is how many opportunities are you going to get as the Reds to go out and get the top hitter or one of the top hitters, and you could offer him the same amount of money as a team like the Chicago Cubs or the Yankees would offer him, and he might actually accept Cincinnati. Like if the Reds offered Cody Bellinger the same amount of money as the Yankees, where's Cody Bellinger going to go? Right. The Reds would have to not only beat the New York Yankees offer, they'd have to blow it out of the water for him to turn down the endorsements of New York, the value of playing in New York, all that kind of stuff. And that's the one opportunity here that I think the Reds potentially have. And maybe Kyle Schwarber would be like, yeah, you're going to have to pay me more too. That's possible. But I think there's at least a possibility there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like the last time that a huge free agent name came up with Cincinnati ties, the Reds got him, right? 25 years ago with King Griffey Jr. Like that happened here in Cincinnati, or maybe that was a trade. I forget if my baseball.
It was a trade. It was a trade, and then
they extended him. But he still wanted to come here. He wanted to come to Cincinnati. Kyle Schwarber obviously fits that mold, and I get it. It's just obviously there are, I want to call them red flags. It just, you talk about tools in baseball. Kyle Schwarber has one tool, and it's a heck of a tool. It's he can send it a long way. He's going to hit 40 home runs pretty annually here at GABP. And you mentioned you think his game ages well. The one thing that I know you and I have talked about before, more than anything that ages well in baseball, is having a good eye, is the ability to take walks and get on base, hunting your ball. It's the way Joey Votto was able to play into his 40s. It's the reason that a lot of these players are able to play in their 40s. Like Juan Soto is going to play into his 40s if he doesn't get hurt because he sees the ball very well. Kyle Schwarber kind of fits that. He's got a 350 on base percentage, even though only hitting about 220 annually. So like, he sees the ball very, very well, and that normally ages well. And it's hard to imagine a Kyle Schwarber having a down year. And what does a Kyle Schwarber down year look like? It's, probably still leading the Reds in home runs and probably having a 330 on base percentage, probably still being the Reds' best hitter is a Kyle Schwarber down year, or the second best hitter. So I see it, but that's a really good point. All right, Kirby, I only promised you 15 minutes. You gave me 20 minutes of your time. I appreciate you coming on here. Who are you rooting for in the NLCS? You rooting for the Brewers, or are you rooting for the Dodgers?
I have to root for the Brewers, but there's a part of me that this says, well, if the Dodgers win, that actually gives us a chance of fixing baseball. So if the Dodgers win this year, then they win again next year. That is maybe the best thing possibly for small markets going into the next CBA. So my heart says Brewers, but my brain says Dodgers.
You want to know a fun tidbit about if the Dodgers repeat as champions? Only 3 teams, I saw this yesterday, only 3 teams in National League history have repeat as champions. The 75-76 Reds, the 1907-1908 Cubs, and the 1921 and 1922 New York Giants. So it's very rare that you see repeat champions here. I feel like I got a double. I saw that in our Discord. I didn't fact check that, so maybe there's got to be a Dodgers team somewhere in the 50s that won back-to-back.
Maybe we need the Dodgers to lose in the World Series this year and then win next year, so they don't steal the Big Red Machines.
The most recent back-to-back champion.
Yeah. There we go. That's what I'm rooting for, I guess.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kirby. See you, man.
See ya.
Stone. Listening to that whole I thought it was really I, as someone on the outside, when I see the Kyle Schwarber discourse, and this is fully understanding that the Reds have swung and miss on pretty much every big-name free agent that they've brought in the last 10 years. Like, I see every single name. The Mike Moustakas, the Jeimer Candelarias, and those aren't big names. Kyle Schwarber would be an even bigger name than that. I guess I just don't quite comprehend this guy doesn't play the field. This guy doesn't run the bases well. This guy, he does one thing. And he hits home runs, and he's going to he'd be, like I said, he'd be the best hitter, but he'd just be your designated hitter. And as someone who understands that designated hitter isn't the most valuable position in a lineup, isn't the most valuable position to add serious money to your team, it seems kind of weird that the Reds would spend big money to do that. But as Kirby put it, this is a guy that, you might be able to pique his interest in moving home. Because, like I said, I'm pretty sure he has a home here in between Dayton and Cincinnati. I'm pretty sure he lives here a lot of the year. And this would be an opportunity to come close to his family and all those things. So you might be able to pique some of that human interest piece. And he'd certainly help the Reds lineup. Do you have any cause for concern? Like, the Reds don't have a whole lot of money, and spending $30 million on a designated hitter seems a little silly to me, but I guess I'm getting closer to understanding it. You got any concern for that?
Well, if he's going to hit 50-plus nukes now.
Fair enough.
So it's like, when's the last time this team has had a guy that can hit the ball over the fence like that, and as often as he does? I get it. He's kind of a one-trick pony, but that's the trick that you really need if you're the Cincinnati Reds. Bellinger's another name you guys talked about. I'm kind of biased there. Cody Bellinger's always been one of my favorite players. I think that would be great, but I do think we've seen really bad seasons from Cody Bellinger in the past, and there's some consistency issues there with him. Whereas, like, what's the worst case for Schwarber? He hits 30 bombs. Like, is that the worst thing he could do? Like, I guess he could get hurt and then miss the entire year, but like, he's gonna hit the ball over the fence, and that's what this team desperately needs. Great point from Kirby about Bellinger. If you just, you give the same offer that New York's going to give, he's not going to come here.
Cody Bellinger ain't coming here, but I will say that if all money's the same, if they're taking the same contract, which they would not be, if they're taking the same money, Cody Bellinger would be a much better signing because he could play the outfield and plays at a pretty high level.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe he's younger. I think he's only 30 years old, Cody Bellinger is. But there is risk with Cody Bellinger because for a 2-year stretch, he was the worst player in baseball. He won the MVP in 2019. Then from 2020 to 2022, he was the worst player in baseball. Obviously reclaimed his career and had a great year in this. Wins above replacement isn't the end-all, be-all. Fully understand that. But if you're asking me what's the worst case that I see with Kyle Schwarber, you can see him being kind of a sub-1 WAR player. Like if he's batting 200 and has a bad year, once again, is 30 home runs and a 315, 320 on-base percentage. But when you're that as a designated hitter, your quote-unquote WAR, I mean, it might be 1. Like it's not a very valuable thing. But on an offense that desperately needs something in there, a feared hitter, I get it. And as I've said multiple times before, I don't ever worry obviously I'm a Cubs fan. I don't ever worry. Everyone always makes fun of, I can't believe you signed Jason Hayward to that deal or Dansby Swanson to this deal or whatever. I never worry about it because you know what? It ain't my money. It ain't my money. And it's not your guys' money either. And I understand that you fully get that the Reds only have this much budget, so that's why you worry about spending that much budget. But you swing and miss on a Kyle Schwarber. That's why you shouldn't worry about the Jeimer Candelario thing. That's why you shouldn't worry about the Nick Martinez getting $21 million. It ain't your money. It ain't your money. And until they fix it and you can start worrying about salary cap and all that stuff, just don't worry about it all too often because, once again, it ain't your money. Final thing we'll do on the show. I believe we had one more mailbag.
We do.
We did have. So who has sent the first three? We had three.
So we had Tasden Bailey for the first one, and then Tasden Bailey again for the second one, and then Stone Shields for the third one.
I can't believe Stone sent one in here. I feel like he talks enough on this show.
Right.
Yeah. We got one more mailbag.
Yeah, and this one comes in from Tasden Bailey.
Tasden again. What a day. Have a day, Tasden.
And it kind of ties in perfectly to what you and Kirby were talking about to end your conversation. Tasden writes, a lot of talk has been made about the Dodgers ruining baseball. They're up 2-0 in the NLCS. If they win the World Series, will this only exacerbate the growing tension in Major League Baseball?
Yeah. Yes. Point blank. Yes, it will. It seems pretty clear that we're already heading towards something, some major change. In baseball. Baseball Players Association is the strongest or second strongest union in the country. It's incredibly strong, and I can't see them wanting a salary cap. But that's why the holdouts will happen in some way, in some form. There will be some major changes made here and there. But as I've put time and time again, the greatest equalizer in this sport isn't money. It isn't rules of the game. It's the sport itself. The National League has played in the World Series for 122 years, and only 3 teams have ever repeated as champions. Obviously, in the American League, that happens a lot more often because the Yankees have won a quarter of all World Series or a fifth of all World Series. What is it, 27 championships through the first 122 times the World Series been played? Like it's the great equalizer in this sport is how random the sport is. That being said, it's all about getting as many shots, getting as many bullets in the chamber as you possibly can, and the Dodgers are always in the postseason. The Yankees are always in the postseason. The Mets probably, I know they didn't this year, will for a long time ahead will probably be in the postseason more often than not. Like money gets you a lot of opportunities. Can you make the most of them? And yeah, there's probably needs to be something changed. And it just stinks that here in Cincinnati we're on the bottom half or the floor of what is able to be done in a capitalistic sport. It's the only sport that mirrors true capitalism in this country. Every other sport kind of has socialistic or communistic vibes and the salary cap and all that stuff. Baseball does not. It's pure capitalism, baby. How much money you got? How much money can you spend? Keep it flowing. Keep it rolling. How much money can you do it? And money wins. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in baseball here in the coming years. But yes, Taston, to answer your question, those problems will be exacerbated by the Dodgers seemingly winning back-to-back years after dishing out all the money that they've had the past years. And we've seen teams spend money before. We've never seen what the Dodgers have done the past few years. And the Dodgers will probably make big splashes this year. They'll probably make even more big splashes this year. I think there's another someone in the chat. Is that Japanese power hitter coming into is he available this year or is that next year? Because it seems like that he's going to be a Dodger. So we'll just keep seeing it. We'll keep seeing it happen. Stone, your opinion on Tassin's question?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Do I think the Dodgers are ruining baseball? I'm not going to say that, but clearly something needs to change, right? I think there's this narrative, and we talked about this a lot on the show, where it's like, oh, the Yankees and the Dodgers, they just win all the championships. That's not really the case anymore. But if if the Dodgers go back to back here, and like you said, they're probably going to add to the team next year and be even better next year, it begins to become a bit of an issue. And I think there's got to be some ways and look, I don't have all the answers here, I'll be completely honest with you, but there's got to be some ways to make things a little bit more competitive for the smaller markets. But then again, like some of this, like the Brewers, right? I mean, they're having success right now. Yeah, they're down 2-0, but they were, the best team in baseball all year from a record standpoint. The Tampa Bay Rays, they went on a great run where they were seemingly always, in contention. So, that's lots of conversations that need to be had with people that are a lot smarter than me, but I do hope we see some changes being made the next time they get together and they hash things out. I do want to bring this up as Jeremy Fowler just said the 49ers view Trey Hendrickson as an ideal fit for their defense, but the Bengals don't seem interested in trading him. Your immediate thoughts to that news? I wouldn't say that's breaking news.
No, it's not breaking news. Listen, the Bengals are currently operating under the sense that they can still compete. They can still make something happen. If they lose 2 of their next 3 games before the bye, before the trade deadline, then they'll be forced. They will be, if they lose 2 of their next 3 games, they will be, what does that make them, 3-6? They'll have no choice. They'll have no choice but to trade Trey Hendrickson. They'll have no choice. So, yeah, it's just point blank. Yeah, they're operating currently. That's why they're not interested. They're operating that they need him and that he will continue to play for the Bengals if they keep it. Zach Taylor's kind of fighting for his job. Duke Tobin's kind of fighting for his job, and to win games, you need to have the best players on the field. And Trey Hendrickson's one of the best players on the roster, so they're going to keep him around as long as they can. But if they drop to 3-6, 2-7. and go on a 7-game losing streak, they will have no option but to trade Trey Hendrickson. That's my opinion. Stone, 11:01. We ran over per usual. We started late, but we ran over. Thank you so much for producing this show. Thank you to Nick Kirby, who was on this show. Tomorrow, Thursday Night Football, ready to rock. I'll be doing a watch along tomorrow for the game. I'll be on Off the Bench tomorrow. I'll be on Off the Bench Friday. I'm excited. I love playing the Steelers, even though they rip my dreams. And I was thinking about this. Joe Flacco in his career against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 12-12. I think I looked that up. 12-12 all time against the Steelers. Jake Browning has had 2 starts against the Steelers, and they are both absolute disasters. That's why Mike Tomlin was a little worried, a little worked up. And I get it. He's scared. He's scared of Flacco. He should be, because we're going to win tomorrow. Stone Shield Show coming up. See you guys.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. My name is Stone Shields. We are here on a Wednesday morning. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us here at the program. Plenty of stuff to talk about on today's show. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime. Here at the Jungle, Paycor Stadium, taking place tomorrow night. And the energy feels a little bit different. Obviously, it's Steelers week, right? That's always big, regardless of, where you're at in the season, early, late, if you're competitive, if you're not competitive. Obviously, one of the best rivalries, in my opinion, in the National Football League. And I think I'm going to make my way down to the Jungle. I think I'm going to make my way down to Paycor Stadium and take in the action live and in person, because I do believe Cincinnati is going to capture a victory in this football game. I haven't thought that since week 2 against the Jaguars, but I feel good about the Bengals. I don't feel great, but based on some of the things you saw offensively in the second half against Green Bay, some of the things the defense was able to do in the first half against Green Bay, you got some guys that are playing at a pretty high level. DJ Turner, by the way, don't look now, but he's leading the National Football League in PBUs, and he's really done a tremendous job. This was a guy last year that got his spot taken at the beginning of the year, and then this year you're kind of going back and forth, like, is he going to be a starter? And he's really developed into a really nice cover guy. Obviously, consistency is something that's going to be very important for him, and we'll see if he can continue to take steps in the right direction, or if this is, a borderline fluky start to the season for DJ Turner. But lots of reason to be optimistic about him. Dax Hill playing at a high level there as well, and the Cincinnati Bengals are going to get Shemar Stewart back for this football game, so might be losing Trey Hendrickson, but they are going to get their rookie first-round pick, who they selected 17th overall in the draft this past April, in Shemar Stewart. And I think that certainly is a very positive sign. We'll talk about that on today's show. We have my college football top 10. Oregon obviously upset at Autzen Stadium by the Indiana Hoosiers. I was high on the Hoosiers before the game, and I'm even higher on them now after that big-time victory on the road for Kurt Cignetti. We'll roll through my entire CFB top 10. Some similarities to the AP poll, some similarities to what I had last week, but a few shakeups there as well. And we'll spend some time talking about some other storylines around the National Football League here on today's show. The Miami Dolphins, a complete disaster. Here at this point. I think going into the year, kind of the writing was on the wall a little bit that it was going to be, a big-time struggle for this team. It feels like Greer, the GM, is kind of, operating with, being on the hot seat, and certainly Mike McDaniel, you don't know how long exactly he'll be able to hold on as the head coach. Tua Tagovailoa saying some things in the media that are a bit head-scratching, so we'll talk about them a little bit. And also the Baltimore Ravens, division rival. I expected them to run away with this division. I expected them certainly to be in a spot where they were competing for a world championship, and Baltimore certainly struggling. One win so far this year. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Obviously, they're without their star quarterback for now. Lamar Jackson, we'll see what the timetable is for him and when he could potentially return. But firing John Harbaugh is something that's been talked about around the NFL. I think that'd be a mistake, by the way, for Baltimore to do that. But we'll talk about, Harbaugh as it relates to him on the hot seat. Also, MLB playoffs had a game last night. The Dodgers completely dominated that game right on the road in Milwaukee. They win it 5-1. Peralta, really the ace of that Milwaukee staff. They turned to him to kind of, pick up a big Game 2 victory, and he was okay in the game, but certainly not good enough. Yamamoto goes the distance, 9 innings, CG, and gave up a home run, by the way, to Jackson Chourio, the first batter that he faced in the ball game, but that was all the Milwaukee offense could muster in that game. Chourio, by the way, is unbelievable. He's 21 years of age, great outfielder, and he hits bombs and just a great hitter in general. So Milwaukee got their backs up against the wall as that series shifts to Los Angeles, and it's tough for me to see that series getting back to Milwaukee with the 2-3-2 format, but obviously we will see. And then a really phenomenal baseball game tonight. Seattle obviously up 2-0. That series now back in Seattle. Shane Bieber takes the bump for Toronto, and George Kirby on the bump for Seattle. He was the starter in Game 5 of the DS against the Tigers, and both those pitchers really, really good. Big move for Toronto getting Bieber, and now obviously borderline must-win situation for the Blue Jays. I'm expecting a phenomenal baseball game tonight. But that's kind of what's on tap for the entirety of our show here today. As always, friendly reminder, if you miss any parts of our show, that is totally fine. It's available in podcast form, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it. You can find us. Goes up in the afternoons shortly after we get done with our show here from 11 to 12. We'll have clips up on YouTube as well. Different segments find their ways onto our YouTube page, and you'll see more clips on social media. Follow me on Twitter at StoneShields_. Follow the show as well at the Stone Shields, and certainly follow Chatterbox Sports there. Additionally, friendly reminder, I am solo producing this show. It's just me. I produce off the bench with Reed Mouse, and then this thing turns over from 11 to noon, and it's just me. So I know some people in the chat are looking for a little bit more interaction with the chat. That's tough to do, obviously, when I can't really do that while I'm sitting here hosting the show and trying to produce it there as well. Going forward, though, maybe we do the mailbag, certainly segments on Wednesdays of Off the Bench. If that's something that you guys are interested in, we certainly could do that a little bit more on this show, or if we just want to dedicate a final segment of the hour to getting in the chat and interacting with you guys, we certainly can do that, but obviously very difficult to do it throughout the entirety of a show when I'm sitting here producing it and trying to talk for an hour straight. But let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Thursday night football coming up in a couple of days against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've said it multiple times throughout the week. I'll say it again. I'm expecting Cincinnati to win this game. Borderline must win. We joke about the term must win. Everybody that does this talks about sports. They love that phrase, right? It gets overused, right? Let's be very, very clear here, especially in baseball. How many times did we sit there for a Reds game and say, yeah, it feels like a must win, when really the only must win, was that, final stretch. There was a couple of games there against Milwaukee in that final series. And, of course, game 2 of the wild card round against the Dodgers was definitely a must win. But it gets overused a lot. I'm not going to sit here and bang the table and say this game against Pittsburgh is a must win. But one thing that I think must happen is that Cincinnati has to either go 3-0 or 2-1 over the course of the next 3 weeks leading into the bye. I think that's the number one thing that needs to transpire for Cincinnati. If they don't do that, I think they're in a spot where they're up against it too much. I don't think they have an opportunity to be playing meaningful games in December and January and position themselves for a potential playoff push. The math gets tough, right? Given the state of the AFC, there's an opportunity that 9 wins could get you in this year. Obviously, the past 2 years, that has not been enough. 10, I think you're definitely in. No worries about it. I think you have an opportunity to get in with 9 wins this year, and we'll see if Cincinnati can do that. Obviously, they need to get 7 more. Their schedule does open up a little bit here. It gets a little bit lighter. Mind you, these 4 games, obviously it's a 4-game skid right now for Cincinnati, and these 4 games are difficult football games. Minnesota and Denver, fringe playoff teams, right? Wouldn't surprise me if both those teams found their way into the postseason. Denver checks a lot of boxes, right? They got a really good defense, a really good head coach, got some skill guys on the outside. If Bo Nix can just get back to how he was playing during his rookie year last year, I think they're a lock to make the playoffs, and I think certainly they're hoping that he can kind of take that next step and, of course, be a little bit better. But he's kind of what's been holding them back from a Denver perspective. And then Minnesota, that's a playoff roster. That's a playoff caliber coaching staff and organization. They just have the question marks there at quarterback. Carson Wentz playing. J.J. McCarthy, he's hurt, but are they any good with J.J. McCarthy in the game? Are they better with Carson Wentz? Those are the questions that those two teams are asking. And obviously the past 2 weeks, those teams are locks to make the playoffs. Green Bay and Detroit, in my opinion, 2 of the best teams in the National Football League. And you were going to struggle in this 4-game stretch, even with Joe Burrow. If you remember to back when we first started this show at the beginning of the year, basically saying how important those first 2 games were against Cleveland and Jacksonville, because there was a real possibility that you went on a 4-game skid even if number 9 was out there playing. And I'm not going to sit here and say they definitely would have. I think Joe Burrow finds a way to win one of those games. I think they definitely beat Detroit with how bad they are on the back end and just some of the bad mistakes that Jake Browning was able to make in that football game. But it was going to be a tough stretch regardless. I think the reason why, people were hitting the panic button and saying this is one of the worst teams in the league, saying the season's over, saying the organization is a mess, saying, everybody should be fired, is just because of the way that they were losing these games. Beyond the Green Bay game, those were 3 really, really ugly losses. And frankly, that can't happen at the professional level when your team goes out there and is just that non-competitive in the football football game. But I do want to understand that's a tough stretch, and this stretch, by the way, continues. Like, Pittsburgh has one loss. They're leading the AFC North. That's always going to be a tough game. Bengals, Steelers, again, even if Joe Burrow is out there, these are really, really difficult games. But I am optimistic that Cincinnati is going to find a way to get it done, and we'll kind of dive into why a little bit here on today's show. But I did want to play this clip a little bit here on the show because Mike Tomlin, he kind of went viral a little bit for some of his comments that he made earlier in the week as it related to the Cincinnati Bengals trading for Joe Flacco. Let's check in and hear what Mike Tomlin had to say.
You know, to be honest, it was shocking to me. Andrew Berry must be a lot smarter than me or us, because it doesn't make sense to me to trade a quarterback that you think enough of to make your opening day starter to a division opponent that's hurting in that area. But that's just my personal feelings.
Pretty interesting stuff there from Mike Tomlin. Usually you don't see, a head coach go out there and call out an organization like that, right? That typically doesn't happen, and by name, right, call Andrew Berry out in that situation. I think he's right, by the way. When the Bengals made this move, we sat here and we talked about, they need to add a quarterback. I was very adamant that they needed to do it and that they would basically be punting on the season if they didn't do it. But the fact that they were able to get Joe Flacco is pretty miraculous. I mean, that's a rivalry, Cleveland and Cincinnati, and just to give them to a division opponent, when you're in a situation where you have to play them one more time. I think tanking in the NFL, people talk about that, and I think it's overblown, right? Are any of these teams really sitting there tanking? Maybe at the end of the year, and if you're in a spot where it's like, well, if we lose, we get the number one pick, then maybe you don't go all out in that game. But there's lives on the line, jobs on the line, right? And I think too much is made of tanking, but when you make a move like this, I mean, you can't help but wonder and scratch your head a little bit. Like, I mean, is Cleveland just flat out tanking? Like, that's, to trade a guy that is, certainly he's 40 years of age, but he's won a Super Bowls, had tremendous success in the league, and you give him to a divisional opponent, it didn't really make sense. And again, it wasn't like it was a second or third round pick. It was a late round pick, a day 3 pick that they got in the process. And there are people out there that say it was a no-brainer for Cleveland to do it. I don't get that at all. I'm with Mike Tomlin. I think in this day and age of the NFL, draft picks are such, they're severely overvalued, in my opinion. Now, I get it. In order to have a good organization, you can't just build through free agency. You have to draft and develop. You have to, right? Kansas City, this dynasty, they've done it. And New England, of course, in their dynasty, they did it as well. You can't just build in free agency. That's not how you build a team. It doesn't work like that. But, I mean, for a guy that is a starting caliber quarterback in the National Football League, Joe Flacco at this point is one of the 32 best quarterbacks on the planet. I'm very convinced about that. And just to give him up for a late-round pick to a team that's in your division makes you scratch your head a little bit. But, Mike Tomlin, that was kind of crazy to see him call out, a GM like that and Andrew Berry and kind of go after him. But I completely agree with him. It was a break that Cincinnati caught, and let's see if they can do anything and capitalize from it and if it leads to any wins down the road. But, of course, Joe Flacco, throughout his career in Baltimore, he got in some serious battles with Mike Tomlin and, of course, Big Ben, and won his fair share of them as well. And obviously, you're hoping that magic can continue on Thursday night. Some good news that Cincinnati got, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Shemar Stewart is going to play in this game. Al Golden mentioned that yesterday when he addressed the media. That is very promising for Cincinnati. He hasn't played since week 2. People forget he got hurt in that game where Joe Burrow did, but obviously the whole world at that point was worried about Joe Burrow, and rightfully so. But, he had shown some flashes, did Shemar Stewart, in those first 2 weeks against Cleveland and against Jacksonville. They were utilizing him a little bit more in that Jacksonville game before he got hurt. It's an ankle, by the way, but I think he's going to get, a heavy dose of plays in front of him in this game. I think he's going to be out there a lot, and he has to be. Trey Hendrickson, up in the air if he's going to be able to play. We talked about yesterday how Ian Rappaport reported that he avoided any serious injury, but it's still kind of a day-to-day thing, and obviously it's difficult on a short week for him to, be in a position where he can go out there and play. By the way, real quickly on Trey Hendrickson, I mean, he started 42 consecutive games for Cincinnati and appeared in 71 of the 73 games since signing with the team in 2021. The only game that he missed was a Week 15 matchup in 2022 due to a wrist injury. That was the only time he missed for an injury, and the other game was in 2021 when the Bengals rested all of their starters. So the guy, say what you want about him, and, he gets his feelings feelings hurt maybe a little bit too easily? Is he borderline selfish in the offseason? You could say all these things, but Trey Hendrickson is available. He plays through injury. He's an unbelievable football player, and he's been an unbelievable football player over the course of the past few years for Cincinnati. And it's tough to imagine what this defense would look like without him, right? This has been a bad defense with Trey Hendrickson. You take him out of the equation right there on those third downs where he shows up big and gets home on the quarterback. You remove him from this defense, things could be a heck of a lot worse over the course of the past few years. And I certainly don't think you have the level of playoff success you had in 21 and 22 without Trey Hendrickson. So basically, if he has an ability to go out there and contribute to winning football and help this team win, he's going to be out there. Zach Taylor called it back contusions in his press conference immediately following the game against Green Bay. Now he's listed as a hip injury on the injury report. So we'll continue to monitor that over the course of the next couple of days. If he can go out there, he will be out there. Make no mistake about it. It's one of the toughest dudes in the league, and obviously he's played through a lot of injuries in the past. But back to Shemar Stewart. Had the ankle, haven't seen him in a few weeks. And, he has a real opportunity here to help save this team's season to some degree. And this is a guy that's a first-round player, top 17 overall pick in the NFL draft. People on draft night in the city, and I remember myself, having some thoughts on a different platform on YouTube, kind of scratching your head on that draft night where it's like, there were safer picks available, safer picks that could help contribute to winning football, but the reason you took Shemar Stewart is because the ceiling was just so absurdly high with what he could do on the football field. The athleticism that he has, the physicality that he brings to the table, even as a guy that's 21 years of age, that is a grown man, that is a violent man out there. And, I think a part of the reason Cincinnati drafted him in that spot is because they thought he could fit in to AFC North caliber football. Now, obviously this year, here in 2025, the AFC North does not look like the AFC North. As you got bad defense in Baltimore, they only got one win. Pittsburgh somehow only has one loss, and Cincinnati's obviously been horrible along with Cleveland as well. But I have full faith that when this thing turns the page to 2026, we're going to see those elements brought back to AFC North football. Maybe I'm wrong, but I still think they drafted him because they viewed him as a potential guy that really fit in with AFC North football. And I'm expecting him to play well in the game. He's going to have to, right? They're going to have to cut him loose. He's going to have to be out there for a lot of snaps. It's going to be interesting to see, how often exactly he's out there, what his snap count looks like. But he needs an opportunity to go out there and wreck the game because that's what Cincinnati needs in this spot, especially with all the youth that they have on the defensive side of the football. And we'll talk about the benching of Logan Wilson here in a second. But they just need that big splashy play. If you remember, last week against Green Bay, there in that first half specifically, the Bengals were applying pass rush with 4 guys. Now, was it like great all-league pass rush? No, but for a team that can't get to the quarterback at all, apart from Trey Hendrickson, when they were sending 4 there in that first half, they were making Jordan Love uncomfortable. Now, Jordan Love is such a good quarterback, he was able to navigate around it, use his legs, right? How many times in that first half did, he pick up some chunk plays there with his legs, or just crucial third downs, I should say, with his legs. But I was impressed with what they were able to do from a pass rush perspective in the first half. Joseph Osai, a guy I've been really, really hard on for several years, he showed up in a big way in the first half. Then obviously lose Trey Hendrickson in the second half. They're getting the ball out quickly, and the pass rush wasn't really a factor there in the second half. But if you can pressure Aaron Rodgers in this game, he's certainly not as mobile as he once was. Now he gets the ball out quicker than basically anybody in the National Football League. I understand that. But if Shemar Stewart can get back there, all right, and be a threat to take him down or maybe rush him a little bit or make him throw the football away, right? That's something Rodgers is good at. He's not going to take a ton of sacks. He'll find ways to throw the football away. But that's a big win for the Cincinnati defense if you are able to do that. And it's going to be critical that they can do that considering, as I just mentioned, the youth on the rest of that defense. You take Logan Wilson out of the equation. That's your 8th-year vet. That's a guy that's wearing a C on his chest and supposed to be one of the leaders of this team and is. But you bench him for a rookie that, again, wasn't an early round pick. Barrett Carter, what was he, a 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, one of the two. And you're asking him to come in here and be a starter at that linebacker spot and putting him directly next to another rookie. And, I've talked at length earlier in the week about my concerns with 2 rookies at the linebacker spot. There's different reasons as to why they're making that move. Are they looking for a little bit more juice, some more athleticism, some more speed? All those things can be very true. But when you have a lot of youth on that defense, it'd be nice to have a guy out there that can, be a leader for you, that's been there, done that, that's a mature guy that knows what to expect, that the moment's not going to be too big for. Logan Wilson was that guy, and he wasn't playing bad. And that's why I scratch my head a little bit at this decision. And both Zach Taylor and Al Golden discussed this at length, basically saying, yeah, this isn't really a Logan Wilson thing. This is a Barrett Carter thing, right? And I got cause for concern with that. Is Logan Wilson the player that, we expected him to be, after coming off that Super Bowl and how good of a season he had there? Obviously he's gone downhill a little bit. He's had some injuries. He's clearly lost a step. I understand that. But he's not playing bad football right now. And they're benching him for a guy that was a mid-round pick. That's a rookie. And, there's some concerns that I have with that. And, Aaron Rodgers, these days in his career, he's not throwing a ton over the middle. So, maybe he won't get tested as much. But I'm Arthur Smith and I'm Pittsburgh. I'm going to try to exploit those rookie linebackers over the middle with slants, right? Obviously, DK Metcalf is a big physical receiver. He can run inside, certainly, and Rodgers could get him the football. But you might see a shift in philosophy a little bit from Green Bay because it's been very predicated on, obviously trying to run the football, have a balanced attack. The back shoulder stuff to DK along the sidelines is something they've had great success with, and Aaron Rodgers just getting the football out of his hands quickly. Haven't really seen his stuff pushed down the football field and haven't thrown across the middle a ton either. But with those rookie linebackers out there, that's something I'm trying to exploit if I'm Arthur Smith in Pittsburgh. It'll be interesting to see, what exactly their plan looks like. But by all accounts, it looks like they're going to continue to roll with Barrett Carter. This wasn't a one, game thing. I think they're going to continue to try to test this out. And I think you're looking at Logan Wilson as a bench guy, not even a rotational guy. And I have my concerns with that. To be very clear, I don't think it's the right move, but I do respect Cincinnati for trying to switch something up, right? I mean, something clearly needs to change. You need to take a look at all the personnel that you have. You can't just keep running it out there because failure over and over and over again, if you're doing the same thing, is just stupidity, right? You got to mix some things up. But again, the other side of that coin is, well, it's a heck of a lot better than it was last year this time of the year on the defensive side of the football. You're not losing games because of your defense. I get they had an opportunity to help you win the game in Green Bay in the second half and weren't able to do it. But this isn't like this is a god-awful defense right now. It's the bottom of the league? Maybe, but I think for me right now it kind of feels average, which is what we all asked of this team coming into the year. If this defense could just be average, this team was in a spot to compete for a world championship. Obviously, that was with Joe Burrow, and they don't have him anymore. But there's some question marks I have with all that youth out there. Obviously, youth at the DB spot. Dax Hill, still a younger guy, right? Obviously, they picked the fifth-year option on him, but he's been hurt. Last year, hasn't played necessarily a ton of football. Remember, this is a guy that was a safety, and then they move him outside, and now he's getting most of his work at that nickel spot. So he's moved around a lot. DJ Turner, he's been a liability in the past, but he seemingly has found something here. He's clearly got a nose for the football, and he's making a ton of good plays out there for Cincinnati right now. How long can he sustain that? Jordan Battle, I believed in, a lot of people believed in. Rough game against Green Bay last week. And, we all sat here and said the safety position needed to be addressed. And they said, no, you know what, we're good. Rolling it back with Jordan Battle and Geno Stone. That appears to be a mistake. We all predicted that one. We're not geniuses for that. But bottom line is there's a lot of youth around that defense. And even along the defensive line, Chris Jenkins shown some good signs. He's a second-year player there as well. A lot of kids out there on that defense for Al Golden. I think it's a borderline mistake to take your captain off there and Logan Wilson, but we'll see. That's obviously going to play a critical factor in this football game. So interesting comments there from Mike Tomlin, of course, about the trade. I don't blame him at all. It's just interesting to hear, a guy call out a GM like that by name in a press conference. Usually doesn't happen. But, there's always a spunk and an energy to Bengals Steelers, and that kind of brought it earlier in the week from Mike Tomlin. Hopefully Cincinnati's up for the challenge. Two of these old quarterbacks. Again, part of the reason I'm going down is because, I haven't seen Aaron Rodgers play in person, and it feels like it's his last year. We'll see if they make a playoff run and want to bring him back or whatever, but it feels like this is probably going to be it for Rodgers. Wanted to take it in, and Joe Flacco. I mean, this is kind of, this is a matchup that I grew up with, right? Obviously not with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh, but those two guys, when you think back, I'm someone that's 25 years of age and look back to kind of the glory days, in my opinion, of football where you had all these great quarterbacks, the Mannings and Tom Brady, of course, Phillip Rivers, Drew Brees. Like you were talking about Flacco and Rodgers in that era there as well, and pretty cool that we get to see this here in 2025. Most people are hoping it's a great matchup. Obviously, we in Cincinnati are not, and hoping the Bengals can pick up a big-time win. But we'll spend some more time as the week progresses, or into tomorrow, I should say, with the game tomorrow, kind of previewing the game a little bit more, breaking it down. Obviously, there's lots of challenges that Pittsburgh is going to bring to the table. That's certainly going to make things difficult for Cincinnati in the football game. Number one, of course, being Aaron Rodgers and his ability to get the ball out of his hands quickly. But, yeah, that's a team that still has T.J. Watt, still has Cam Hayward. They can still get home and get to the quarterback. Hopefully they can win some one-on-one matchups in the secondary. I think Joey Porter Jr. is a good cover guy. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey now playing nickel. So that's a good defense. This Bengals defense is going to have to come to play, because if they give up, 27, 28 points in this game, that's going to be too much, in my opinion, to overcome. Defense has to step up in a big way. All those rookies out there, I have concern about that. But I do think the Bengals are going to be able to score some points. I think they're going to get at least 20 in this game, despite the fact they're going up against a really, really good defense. Herbig, the linebacker, is tremendous as well, along with Highsmith. So going to present a lot of issues, and hopefully the offensive line can certainly build off some of the stuff they were doing in the second half there as well, because they began to settle down a little bit. Reisner, he was thrown back into the mix. Thought he did a nice job there in the second half, and we'll see if that momentum can carry over to Thursday night, because it's Bengals Steelers. It's going to be tough. It's going to be physical, and we'll see if these boys are up for the challenge. All right, transitioning here to our college football top 10. We do it every Wednesday here at the show. NFL Power Rankings go out on Tuesdays, and our college football top 10 on Wednesdays. By the way, if you missed the Power Rankings, that video will probably go out later today. And a big shout out to my guy, Andrew Collinsworth. He does a tremendous graphic for us that goes up on our show's Twitter page, so you can find that as well. He does a great job with that. We certainly appreciate him for helping out with our show on a weekly basis. But we'll get into our top 10 here. College football, several upsets, of course. Texas upsets Oklahoma, so they are out. Had Oklahoma at that 10 spot in our rankings last week. Credit to John Mateer, by the way, for, gutting through that, coming off the hand surgery. He clearly, was not himself out there. It was kind of sped up, and that's one of the best defenses in the country there, obviously, against Texas. He threw the 3 picks in the game, but credit to him for going out there and gutting it out. Oklahoma, their schedule's a gauntlet. You had some question marks with that team. They're a solid football team. We'll find out if they're a playoff team here, if they can, bounce back from that loss and only lose one more game the rest of the way with that brutal schedule. But big shout out to him. They were 10 last week. They're on the outside looking in, obviously, this week after losing to Texas. And then 2 other teams that are not quite in the top 10, Tennessee. People kind of have stopped talking about them. They played an incredible first half. Unbelievable first half against Georgia a couple of weeks ago in that game, and then kind of sputtered a little bit offensively in the second half, and obviously their defense couldn't get off the field there late in that game against Gunnar Stockton. But Tennessee's a really good team, and they have a massive matchup on the road in Tuscaloosa this week, 3rd Saturday of October. Can't wait to preview that on our show Friday. That's going to be a great game. Alabama's obviously in the midst of this gauntlet. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But Tennessee just barely on the outside looking in, and then Notre Dame just barely on the outside looking into. Look, I made the prediction last week that Notre Dame's going to mess around and make this college football playoff despite those 2 early losses. But look at the 2 teams they lost to, Miami and A&M. We were top 5 teams, however you want to look at it. Coaches poll, AP poll, what we're going to do here, what people that talk about the sport do. Those are 2 really good teams, and those were 2 really competitive games. They didn't get blown out in either one of these games, and they had opportunities to win both those games late. So I still have belief in Notre Dame. Defensively, they look a little bit better. That's obviously their biggest concern and something that has to get cleaned up for Marcus Freeman. But C.J. Carr's an incredible quarterback, and he's playing the position at a really high level for the Fighting Irish. So they're just barely on the outside looking in for me in these top 10 rankings, despite the fact, of course, that they do have 2 losses on the year. All right, coming in at number 10, I have LSU. Last week, they were outside of my top 10. The AP poll has them at that number 10 spot. They were my pick coming into the year to win the national title. They haven't been eliminated from that yet, so I'm not going to back off that pick here. But, offensively, it's been a struggle bus for them. And speaking of bust, the Nuss bus has not been as good as I anticipated. I thought coming into the year he was going to be the best quarterback in college football. Clearly, he is not. That title belongs with guys like Ty Simpson and Julian Sayin here at this point. But that LSU defense is real. They got Delane, the transfer, Whit Weeks, great linebacker. That defensive line's really, really good as well. So they're always going to have teams keep their team in games. They didn't score many points last week. They were barely able to win. But it's a victory, right, for LSU. And, we'll see what they can do going forward. But I think the key for them is their defense is always going to keep them in games. They have a tough schedule ahead. They suffered the defeat, obviously, to Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. By the way, I don't think Ole Miss is as good as maybe some people in the country think. But LSU, that defense is always going to keep them there, and I'm still going to hold on to some hope and optimism that their offense can get it going, but they haven't been able to do so to this point, but good enough given some of the losses around the country to be inside the top 10 at that number 10 spot. At number 9, I have Ole Miss. Last week I had them at number 7, and the AP poll has them all the way up at number 5 right now for the Rebels. They played Washington State last week, and then even going into that game, I was like, let's pump the brakes a little bit here on Ole Miss. Yeah, they had the big win at home against LSU, but again, LSU is not as good as many people thought coming into the season. They struggled, particularly in the first half, against a bad Washington State team. Kiffin, since he's been here, they've had kind of a knack of falling into these trap games and not necessarily showing up in games where they should go out there and really dominate the opponent. And that kind of reared its ugly head once again for them this past week. They have Georgia this week, going to be a great football game. Georgia actually heavy favorites in that game, as I think they should be. But Ole Miss, I have them down at that 9 spots. Chambliss, the quarterback, they have decisions to make. Are they going to stick with him? Simmons, who was their starter coming into the year, he was hurt, but now he's available. How are they going to, play out that quarterback position? And defensively, I think this is probably one of the best defenses that Lane Kiffin has had, which I think has allowed them to kind of, that game last week, right? Their defense was able to keep them in that game when they were sputtering a little bit there on offense, and ultimately help them win. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss falls out of my top 10 after this week, because I think Georgia is going to beat them. But the AP poll has them all the way up at number 5. We had them last week. Despite the win against Washington State, I bumped them down a couple of slots to number 9. Oregon at number 8. They obviously lost at home at Autzen Stadium to the Indiana Hoosiers. I had them all the way up at number 2 in my top 10 last week. AP poll, by the way, agrees, has them right at that 8 spot. Look, I thought Oregon was clearly the second best team in the country. I thought they were going to have an opportunity to give Ohio State a fight in the Big Ten championship game and perhaps the college football playoff after that as well. I thought Oregon this year was better than Oregon last year. But if you're a Ducks fan, there's plenty of reason to be concerned because, Dan Lanning is known for tough, physical, buttoned-up football teams. And Indiana, in a lot of ways, kind of beat them at their own game, right? They punched them in the mouth. Start to finish, they were clearly the more tougher team, the more physical team. They were not fazed by the environment whatsoever. And Oregon blinked a little bit under pressure. I think, we all think very highly of Dante Moore. I still look at him as a first-round guy in the NFL draft. But he had some opportunities there to help elevate his team, right? When they're getting behind, right? When they're getting punched in the mouth, where the Indiana offense is scoring some points. He had an opportunity there to show that he has the ability to elevate the guys around him and put in kind of a storybook performance, and he wasn't able to do so. I get, he was under pressure a lot there as well, and, things weren't perfect for him, but that's life as playing quarterback. Things aren't going to be perfect for you, and it's how you can handle those circumstances and rise above that really shows whether or not you truly are a good quarterback, or a great quarterback, I should say. And there was opportunities there for Dante Moore to do that in the game. He wasn't able to do so, and they fall down to number 8 here in my top 10. Let me be very clear. I still view Oregon as a playoff team and still think they can make some noise. But obviously after that performance, when they get out-toughed and out-physicaled in a game in front of a sold-out crowd at home, they just didn't look ready to go. And, that's a reflection directly on Dan Lanning, who I also think the world of. But if you're a Duck fan, you got to be a little bit concerned with how that game transpired. But Indiana, of course, is a really, really good football team, and we'll talk about them in a second. At 7, I have Georgia. Last week, they were 8. The AP poll has them at number 9. 20-10, they beat Auburn at Jordan-Hare. Look, Auburn's a bit of a mess when it comes to winning and losing games. Hugh Freeze, in my opinion, is a bit of a clown. But, look, Jordan-Hare at night, I don't care. It's tough, man. It's tough. I don't care who you are going in there. It's tough. And, it was tough for Georgia in this game. That Auburn defense has some dudes on it, by the way, that can make some plays. And, the Georgia offense wasn't able to really get a rhythm and a flow going. Only led to them scoring 20 points. Auburn would be a lot better if they didn't have Jackson Arnold playing quarterback and if they had somebody that was a little bit more competent throwing the football. But I still think Georgia is very much a threat in the national picture. I still think very much they're a threat as a potential team that could win the national championship. Are they as good as years past? No, I do think they're a step up from last year's team. They go from Carson Beck, obviously, to Stockton here full time, but the receivers are better, right? Nobody had more drops in the country than Georgia last year. They've cleaned that up. Branch is a tremendous player. The transfer from USC was viewed as he may have been the top recruit when he came out of high school. Kirby Smart, in my opinion, the best coach in the country. And Georgia's going to continue to be an issue. I think they're going to beat Ole Miss at home this week. I mean, another home loss for Georgia is kind of hard to fathom, right, after already losing to Alabama at home this year. Don't envision that's going to happen against Ole Miss. I think they'll be ready to go in that game. And, Ole Miss obviously beat them last year with Jackson Dart, so there's going to be a fire in the belly of Kirby Smart in Georgia to kind of get that one back a little bit. And I think they're going to continue to climb these rankings. I've got them at 7. I'm a little bit higher on Georgia than some other people. Texas Tech, have them at 6. Look, we talked about it with Indiana earlier in the week. Like, sometimes you just have to believe what you're seeing, right? Is it hard to imagine Texas Tech being a top 6 team in the country, a team that just spent a ton of money in NIL in the portal? But it's reality. They're a really, really good football team. We'll see if they, find themselves against an elite opponent. But they've had, Utah's a team that I think is a good football team. They beat the crud out of Utah. Houston at the time was undefeated. They beat the crud out of them there as well. And I think Houston's a little bit fraudulent, but they've been taking care of business. They've got 2 quarterbacks that can play, with Morton and the backup there as well, Will Hammond as well. And, they've got a physical defensive front. They protect on the offensive line. And you gotta give a lot of credit to them for what they've been able to do. Clearly the best team in the Big 12. We'll see if they stumble at some point, but I think at this point, based on what they've put on tape, what they've put out there on the football field, Texas Tech has been a tremendous team, and I have them at number 6. Last week I had them at 9. AP poll has them at 7. At number 5, I have the Alabama Crimson Tide. Kalen DeBoer just continues to navigate this gauntlet of a schedule. People were calling for his head that week 1 game against Florida State. Don't look now, but it's the best passing attack in the country, and they're playing some physical big boy football there as well. Last week I had them 6. The AP poll has them 6. That's 3 straight wins against ranked opponents, 2 of them on the road, and they got to do it again here this week as Tennessee comes into town 3rd Saturday of October. Tennessee got the better of DeBoer and the Tide last year at Neyland. This time, Alabama gets them at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Think it's going to be a tremendous game. Look, that Heupel offense has had success against Alabama, even with Saban there. The past few years, or the last couple of years of Saban's career, Heupel was scoring points, scoring a lot of points against Saban, and I think they're going to find a way to score a lot of points in this game as well against Alabama. The Tide have to clean up some of the stuff they did, on offense. Thought Ty Simpson was tremendous again, but they had some, situations where they took some negative plays and they were in 3rd and longs and they were punting the football a little bit against Missouri. They're going to have to be a little bit more buttoned up on offense in this game because I think this thing could turn into a high-scoring affair. People kind of just stopped talking about Tennessee after they lost the Georgia game, but they win this game. I think you're talking about Tennessee as a top 7-8 team in the country there as well. So, I think this is going to be a tremendous college football game. The environment's going to be great. Tennessee, Alabama, what a rivalry. And we'll see. I think DeBoer gets it done again, but we'll preview that game on Friday. Texas A&M, have them at number 4. They were number 4 for me last week. The AP poll also has them at number 4. They're a complete football team. There's multiple different ways in which they can beat you. They can beat you throwing the football. They can beat you running the football. They can beat you with defense there as well. Mike Elko is doing a tremendous job as the head coach. Marcel Reed, he's explosive. He makes plays on the ground. People didn't give him a lot of credit with what he can do through the air. He's throwing the football well. Craver and Concepcion, the 2 wide receivers, they're tremendous. And, I think they're the best team in the SEC right now. And, we'll see how that looks as they progress through their schedule. But I've been really impressed with Texas A&M. They stay at number 4. Miami, I'm going to keep them at number 3. The AP poll has them at number 2. Miami already kind of played their tough opponents, right? Like, we'll see what they can do going forward, but they're going to be favorites in every game the rest of the way in the regular season. And for us to continue believing in Miami, they're going to have to keep showing up and winning in big ways. We'll see if they can do that. Miami teams in the past, I think a lot of people in the country have, we're just waiting for Miami to be really back, right? And we act like they are some years, and it's like, well, really, they're not. They might be back this year. That defense is tremendous. That offensive line is tremendous. They've got some freshmen that contribute to what they're doing as a football team. And Carson Beck is the trigger man. He's looked really, really good. I think he got shafted a little bit for how things ended in Georgia. He needed the fresh start. He's got it. And coming off that elbow injury, he's looking really good throwing the football. And particularly those deep balls down the football field have looked really, really nice. I think they're in a spot where they can compete with the top teams in the country, but we're not going to really find out until late in the year because their schedule is so weak over the course of the next few weeks. At 2, I have Indiana. I tried to tell everybody that Indiana, was real. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't pick them to beat Oregon, but I thought the game would be close. I thought it would be competitive. I had them at number 5 last week, and now they jump up all the way to number 2. The AP poll has them at 3 behind Miami. How about those receivers, by the way? Surratt is unbelievable. Mendoza, people are sitting here acting like he might be the number 1 overall pick, which I think is a little bit aggressive. But how can you not like, that kid? I think he's an upgrade at quarterback. And Rourke was great for him last year, but Mendoza is a lot better. Transfer from Cal. Cignetti's coaching with confidence. That team's playing with confidence. They've got skill guys. They can run it. They can throw it. They're tough. They're physical. They can block. This is a team that can win the national title. All right, this isn't some cute story of, Indiana, and they don't play anybody. They just went into Autzen Stadium and won and punched Oregon right in the mouth in the process. That doesn't happen. And they were able to do that. And, we'll see. Obviously, a team now is getting a lot of credit for what they've been able to accomplish. And, they have success. And we'll see how teams handle success. We haven't really had to see Indiana do this, right? We've seen teams in the past, Georgia's, Alabama's, Ohio State's. It's difficult to handle success. We've never really had to see that for Indiana because even last year where they were winning these games, they always felt like they had to prove it because people continue to not believe in them. Well, people now, if they weren't already, are believing in this football team, and we'll see how they handle that success and, people singing the praises of Indiana. So I've got them at number 2, a really good football team. Ohio State at 1. They were 1 last week. AP poll has them at 1. It's clear. It's obvious. They're the best team in the country. Really good quarterback. They can run it. Bo Jackson, true freshman, he's tremendous. Ryan Day is coaching with a swagger that he's never had before in his life and a confidence that he's never had before. And that defense is the best unit out of any unit in the country. I didn't even think they played well against Illinois, and that supposedly was a ranked opponent, and they beat the snot out of them on the road. Again, I've said it multiple times on the show. I don't see anybody other than Michigan giving them really a challenge, especially with the state of Penn State, considering they fired James Franklin. They lost their starting quarterback there as well. Ohio State's really, really good. We'll see if somebody can ultimately knock them off in the postseason. But there you have it. Tennessee 10, Ole Miss 9, Oregon 8, Georgia 7, Texas Tech 6, Alabama 5, A&M 4, Miami 3, Indiana 2, and Ohio State 1, with Tennessee and Notre Dame being my first 2 teams on the outside looking in. All right, the Miami Dolphins. Look, I think there was the noise around Miami this offseason, right? Teams have those joint practices kind of during the preseason, right, before you get into the regular season, and they had one with one team. The name of the team escapes me at this moment, but basically players from that team were coming off like, hey, that is a disaster there in Miami. They don't have any belief in their coach. They have no idea what they're doing. They're making mistakes. They're fighting with one another. It's just a total mess. And, sometimes you get stories like that in the offseason, and it's like, whatever. Like, it's just, people coming up with storylines. But that one was like, that's a serious problem because this is a team that has been to some playoff games, right? For a stretch there, they were viewed as the best offense in the NFL, and that's not hyperbolic. I mean, with Mike McDaniel, the creativity that he has offensively, his brilliance in the run game. Remember, they had, Mostert and obviously Achane early. They still have Achane, of course, but, it's speedster running backs. Tua, he was hitting his back foot. He was getting the ball out of his hands quickly to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and that whole thing is completely blown up. The knock on Miami has always been they're too much finesse and not enough physicality, and that has kind of been an Achilles heel for him. But they're just not a good football team whatsoever. And when you have a guy like McDaniel that kind of walks around the way he does and talks the way he does at press conferences, he doesn't really give off the vibe of a head coach, like he knows what he's doing. And I've said it before on the show, how you handle yourself at the podium, that goes a really, really long way. And you can do whatever the heck you want at the podium when you're winning, but when you're losing, it better be buttoned up. It better be a clear message. It better be, keeping the locker room together, something that gives Zach Taylor credit, despite how disastrous this year has been. He's done a great job of that. They've had opportunities here over the past 2 weeks to really right their season, as they had kind of, dropped some games early on. They get blown out by the Colts to start, but the Colts are a good team, and we certainly have seen that. They've struggled in the division. That's always kind of been an issue for them, and they lose to New England and Drake May. They lose to the Bills. They right the ship against the winless Jets, but these past 2 weeks, they've had an opportunity. They were up 17-0 against the Panthers. They let that slip away, right? They had a lead late against the Chargers, right? They score in the final minute of that game, and then defensively, Herbert makes a tremendous play, credit to him, but then the Chargers kicked that game-winning field goal, and, we'll see. They were a real opportunity there to kind of be 500 and right the ship there in Miami. And things have kind of spiraled on them these past 2 weeks. And, I think it's a direct reflection of their head coach. And when you have, it's one thing to lose in this league, but when you're losing and the noise is really loud and you got people, making comments about, your team and how exactly you aren't exactly a team that is, buttoned up, or a team that knows what they're doing, and you're making silly mistakes, or a team that has belief in their head coach. And then your quarterback goes out there at his press conference and is like, yeah, we got guys not showing up to player-only meetings, guys showing up late to stuff. Like, what are you doing, Tua? And Tua, from time to time, throughout the course of his NFL career, has made you scratch your head a little bit from the stuff he says at the podium, but that's got to be in-house. Can you imagine Tom Brady going to the podium and being like, yeah, we got these player-only meetings, but people aren't showing up, and some guys are, but they're showing up late? Like, that's got to be in-house. And as a quarterback, that's something that you have to fix, and you're not going to fix it by complaining to the media. So, we'll see. I was a big believer in Tua coming out. Obviously, he's had the injury issues, which are a big reason, why, they faltered a little bit. But, he just can't. The arm that he has, it's a very accurate arm with the football. But now lately you're seeing him turn the football over a little bit. That's been an issue for him. And it's just late in the year. The Miami, ever since McDaniel's been there, Miami, apart from this year, has been a team that's phenomenal in September and October. But then it gets a little bit colder. It becomes a little bit more playoff football. You're going on the road, hostile environments. Even when you're at Miami, it's not so hot, and it's not, a direct advantage for you. The team kind of falls off. And, McDaniel's been an exciting guy, as a play caller, right? Some of the stuff that he schemed up is brilliant in the run game and the passing game. We've all seen it. But it's just hard to imagine, him hanging on to his job here. Tua, of course, is under contract. But when you lose the locker room in this league, it can get really dark for you really, really quick. That's something that Zach Taylor is kind of holding on to right now. So you haven't really heard a ton of outside noise about, things not going well inside the locker room, or people losing belief in the team, or losing belief in the organization, or losing belief in the coaching staff. And that's something Zach Taylor has been able to hang his hat on. But with what's transpiring in Miami, that certainly is not the case. And we'll see exactly how long Mike McDaniel can keep his job there, because things are not good, especially after those two collapses these past 2 weeks. John Harbaugh, the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, he's been the head coach for as long as I can remember. He's done a tremendous job, specifically during the regular season, leading his Baltimore team. He has been able to hang his hat on that Super Bowl with maybe, borderline a bit too long if they didn't win that game against his brother in the Niners. Does he still have this job? I don't know. But, postseason success has been something that's been a bit of an issue. The Ravens, they win all these games in the regular season. Lamar, he wins these MVPs. Postseason, they win some games, but the fact that they haven't been to a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, and I get they got Mahomes in that conference. Trust me, I understand. But that feels like that's a shortcoming for this organization. Now you look down, it's a team that only has one win, and you want to talk about things being ugly in Cincinnati. It's equally as ugly, if not more ugly, in Baltimore, right? Particularly on the defense. They showed up a little bit, only gave up 17 to Stafford and company this past week. But this Baltimore defense looks nothing like Ravens defenses. And we all sit here and we talk about, Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs. And the reality of the situation is those guys have been retired for quite some time. But there have still been elements of the toughness and the physicality of those defenses that has kind of carried over the course of the past few years and even the past decade or so here in Baltimore. And it feels like, a Raven defense or an AFC North defense. I mean, this Ravens defense is Swiss cheese. I mean, you can score points at an absurd rate against these guys. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. They miss tackles. They're not tough. They're not physical. They're not turning over the opposition. They're not creating turnovers. And it just looks nothing like the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I feel like Harbaugh's in a spot where he's probably safe, right? And he doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to, want to leave, right? It's the Harbaughs, those guys. All they care about is football, and he's making a ton of money, but what's he really doing with all that money, right? I mean, he's locked in. He's coaching football at all times. It's not like he's really reaping the benefits of all the money that he is making. It doesn't strike me as something the Harbaughs like to do. I mean, that's just a football family that all they care about is football, and I bet he's probably more motivated than ever to get this thing fixed, right? Because he really hasn't had to face this level of adversity. There's a question about, could the Ravens trade him, right? We haven't seen that in however long a head coach gets traded. That could be something that's potentially interesting. He has a close relationship with Eric DeCosta, the GM. I don't think that's something that's going to happen. That's something that's been floated around. But it's hard for me to imagine John Harbaugh stepping away. And also, he's not ready to be done coaching. I definitely know that. I don't know him personally, but I know he's not ready to be done coaching. And, you're going to want to leave an organization that's, look, say what you want about Baltimore, obviously a rival for the Cincinnati Bengals. But it's one of the most stable organizations in the National Football League, right? You put it right up there with the Eagles of the world, or even the Steelers of the world, or the Niners. It's just a really well-run, well-oiled machine. They keep things in-house. The owners don't meddle. They win football games. They have success in the postseason. They're not firing people every other week. There's a foundation there, and I think he understands that. He's probably not. There's not going to be a better opportunity for him to win somewhere else. And he loves Lamar Jackson too, and I think he's motivated by wanting to get Lamar Jackson into a Super Bowl. I think that's something that does motivate him. And by the way, I do think it would be a massive mistake for the Ravens to do that. But again, it's the NFL. And when you get blown out over and over again, especially when you come into a year with high expectations, I get he's dealing with the starting quarterback being down too, but it becomes a possibility, right? Now, if he gets fired, he will be without a job for maybe 10 or 12 minutes before somebody calls him. Whether it be, obviously, the Titans' job is now open. There's going to be 4 or 5 more at least that open up when this next carousel begins for head coaches in the National Football League. But it is very interesting, and we talked about it on Off the Bench about him coming here to Cincinnati. He's a Miami guy, right? He's cradle coaches there at Miami University, my alma mater. And would there be interest in coming here from Harbaugh? I don't know. I don't think he wants to play his former team, the Ravens, twice a year, right? A rival of the Baltimore Ravens. But it becomes interesting because I think there's this notion that we have that Tomlin's never going to get fired. Or, Harbaugh's never going to get fired, these guys that have been here forever. And that could completely change the trajectory of a division, right? Because obviously, players come and go or whatever, but Tomlin and Harbaugh have been staples in this division for certainly most of my life. And there's a real possibility that they could be moving on from him if this thing continues to spiral in the wrong direction. Again, it's not my prediction. Last week, I don't know what it is this week. The Ravens were still favorites to win the division, which is pretty remarkable despite only having one win. But this thing gets hard with the math, right? If they continue to lose football games as far as them getting into the playoffs, even if Lamar Jackson is going to be able to come back and win some football games, which when he comes back, he will be able to do that, right? There will be a few games that they win directly because of Lamar Jackson because he puts them on his shoulders. He's just that great of a player. But I think the idea of Harbaugh potentially not being the man in Baltimore is something that needs to be considered. Again, I don't think it's the right thing. I think it's a mistake, but it definitely could happen. MLB playoffs. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we got a game tonight. I think it's going to be tremendous. The Blue Jays need it bad. They were my pick to win the World Series. When the playoffs started, we went through the whole bracket. And, I knew that the Mariners could give them a fight, just what they can do from a pitching perspective. But I thought the Jays would be able to hang in there a little bit. And, the first game was 3-1, but game 2, I mean, that was an absolute shellacking. They got taken out to the woodshed, gave up 10 runs in that ball game. But I think tonight's going to be tremendous. I'm really looking forward to that matchup. George Kirby takes the hill for the Seattle Mariners. He was the starter in game 5 against the Tigers. He didn't pitch much. I think he got pulled at like 70 pitches, 65 pitches, something like that, as they kind of went into the bullpen. Ended up actually being a mistake, as Carpenter hit another home run off the guy that they brought in immediately, which, by the way, kind of a side tangent. Sometimes it's like, if you got a starter in there and he's rolling, keep him in there. I guess you're going to get to the postseason and freak out and try to throw in another guy that's been sitting there in the bullpen all day and, just was warming up. You're going to bring him in to face this guy when your starter's rolling. I get it. It's a matchup thing, but I don't know. I think that sometimes managers overmanage a little bit in the postseason. It bit Seattle in the behind there, but they were able to, of course, win the game, and nobody's going to talk about it. But that was a decision that I didn't fully get. And I understand, obviously, that in that spot, Carpenter had been so incredible off Kirby throughout the entirety of the year and the entirety of that game there as well. So I understand that, but should be a great game tonight. Shane Bieber on the bump for Toronto. He's one of my favorite guys to watch pitch. He is tremendous, and that offense obviously is potent for the Jays, but they've kind of been stymied a little bit with the pitching of Seattle. But I think that's pretty much, I don't know the line exactly, but a borderline pick 'em. Not exactly sure who has the lean there, but should be a tremendous game. Their game 3 must win, obviously, for the Jays. You fall down 3-0, that's not really going to do much good for you. And then that game 2 last night in Milwaukee, the Dodgers are good, man. We talked about it on Off the Bench, how people are already talking about them repeating, and then what if they three-peat, and what does that mean for baseball? We've always had this kind of excuse of like, the big markets, they pay all this money to these stars, but it doesn't directly equate to world titles. Well, that might be switching here a little bit if the Dodgers win again. They look unbelievable. The big question for them, obviously, is the bullpen nearly cost them in game 1. Sasaki, who was tremendous against the Reds, he came in and he didn't know what was going on in that game against Milwaukee. He gets pulled. They bring in somebody else for the final out, and they're able to win that game and just dominated game 2 yesterday. The pitching, Yamamoto and Snell, I mean, these guys are pitching at a really, really high level. For the Dodgers, Yamamoto gives up the home run to begin the game to Churio, and then it's just absolutely lights out as he goes to CG and only gives up 2 hits the rest of the way. But it's hard to imagine Milwaukee getting back into that series. But Milwaukee, a team that beat the Dodgers, I believe they swept them on the season, beat them 6 games out of the 6 that they played during the regular season. So we'll see if they're able to settle in and pick up a win on the road as that series shifts back to Los Angeles. But if we get a Dodgers-Mariners or even a Dodgers-Blue Jays World Series, if Toronto could come back, that's absolutely a banger. I know you have one borderline small market. I mean, Toronto's a huge city, but and Seattle isn't really a small market, but it's up there, Pacific Northwest. People don't really talk about them a ton. But those 2 teams in the American League are really, really good, and this by no means is a shoe-in for the Dodgers to go out there and win this World Series. I think it feels like they're going to beat Milwaukee, but for the World Series, I think we're going to get a very competitive World Series. That'll do it for this edition of the Stone Shield Show. Appreciate everybody sticking around, hanging out with us throughout the duration of the morning. Back with Off the Bench tomorrow, 10 to 11. My show will follow 11 to noon. We'll preview the Bengals game. We'll talk in depth about that. We'll talk a little baseball there on the show, among other things here as we work into tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone as always. If you want to send in mailbag questions, that is something that we can do. My email address is stoneshields, STONESHIELDS 888 at gmail.com. stoneshields888 at gmail.com. You want to send in some questions, we can do a mailbag segment if you guys want. So I know some people were that are loyal here and watch what we're doing every single day. I wish there was a little more interaction with the chat. It can be very difficult when I'm solo producing this thing, but we certainly could perhaps do a mailbag segment if that is something that interests you guys and something you want to be a part of. That'll do it for the show. Appreciate everyone as always, and we'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Until then, take care, everybody.